Today on the Matt Walsh Show, the UK is in the midst of a full-scale crackdown on free speech. The US might be next. We'll talk about it. Also, unmarried women are more liberal than they've ever been as the political gender divide grows deeper. Why is that happening, and what can we do about it? Cori Bush lashes out in a typically unhinged way after losing her primary. And I'm venturing into one of the darkest and most depressing corners of the internet to see if maybe I can shed a little bit of light there. We'll talk about all that and more today on the Matt Walsh Show. DailyWire Plus members have unlimited on-demand access to our uncensored, ad-free daily shows, real-time breaking news, and investigative journalism. Don't be left in the dark. Join us and the fight right now. DailyWire.com/subscribe. Security is a top-of-the-mind concern for many Americans during these crazy times. Security for our country, security for our leaders, security for our families. But you're not financially secure if all your eggs are in one basket. Consider diversifying at least some of your savings today with the help of Birch Gold Group. Gold and silver are an excellent way to diversify your savings. They're a hedge against inflation, a physical asset. It's in high demand globally. Through my friends at Birch Gold Group, you can own physical gold and silver in a tax-sheltered retirement account. That's right. You diversify an old IRA or 401k for no money out of pocket into an IRA in gold and silver. There's just one thing you can do today to secure your family's savings. Text Walsh to 989898 and receive a free, no-obligation info kit to learn the role that precious metals play in your overall saving strategies. Again, text Walsh to 989898. With an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau, thousands of happy customers, you can trust Birch Gold to help diversify your savings and secure your family's financial future. Text Walsh to 989898 today. When several children were stabbed to death while attending a Taylor Swift-themed dance class in the UK late last month, British politicians and media outlets immediately went to great lengths to absolve themselves of any responsibility. They declared that decades of unrestricted mass migration couldn't possibly be the reason that 3 young girls were dead and many more were critically injured. The fact that the alleged killer was born in Britain to Rwandan parents who somehow ended up in Britain, the government insisted was completely irrelevant. Only far-right extremists would say otherwise. As I outlined earlier this week, British politicians threatened to arrest those far-right extremists for hate speech and misinformation. As protests and riots broke out all over the country, the government promised to punish anyone who suggested that maybe open borders were a bad idea. But the problem with punishing wrongthink is that it does nothing to address the underlying problem. You can throw every single right-wing commentator in the Tower of London for saying that mass migration has deadly consequences, and they'll still be right. And children will continue to be targeted because of the barbaric ideology that Europe's leaders have deliberately imported from the third world. As if to prove that point, on Wednesday, authorities in Vienna arrested 2 suspects who were planning a terrorist attack at Taylor Swift's concerts that were originally scheduled for this weekend. Concerts have been canceled, apparently because the threat remains high. One of the suspects is reportedly 19 years old and pledged allegiance to ISIS. The police are apparently looking for at least one additional suspect. Bomb-making materials are involved, and beyond that, we're not sure exactly who these suspects are at the moment because the authorities won't say. Watch.
We have some breaking news for you. Austrian police say they have arrested 2 people suspected of planning an attack at a Taylor Swift concert in Vienna, Austria. Officials say a 19-year-old suspect made, quote, concrete preparatory acts for a terrorist attack. Swift has concerts scheduled in Vienna Thursday, Friday, and Saturday night.
According to German police, at least one of the suspects was a 19-year-old who was radicalized and joined ISIS via the internet. And when they took him into custody, they found substances of chemicals that could possibly be used to make bombs. However, that is something that they are looking into. Vienna has a track record of being something of a breeding ground, or at least it has a track record of having inspired young people to join ISIS, even go and join the Islamic State.
So according to that report, Vienna now has a track record of being a breeding ground for the Islamic State. What's not stated in that news report is what could possibly explain this troubling rise in terrorist incidents in a place like Austria. It is a country that used to be known as the birthplace of classical music and strong coffee, and now they're a breeding ground for ISIS? How did that happen? What got into all these Austrians? It's a mystery wrapped in an enigma. What's unstated, of course, in that report is that an awful lot of foreign nationals have poured into Austria over the past few decades from countries like Montenegro, Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, Chechnya, Turkey, Somalia. And some of these immigrants are doing things that Austrians don't generally do. Just a few months ago, for example, a 14-year-old ISIS sympathizer from Montenegro was arrested in Austria with a knife and an axe that she allegedly planned to use in a terrorist attack. How did a 14-year-old terrorist from Montenegro get into Austria? Well, who knows? The media doesn't care. Reporters aren't even allowed to bring up any of this immigration stuff because it might lead people to conclude that more immigration isn't always a good thing, that maybe immigration isn't always an enriching thing for a country. In fact, in the UK, even suggesting that maybe immigration isn't always great can now land you in prison. Here's England's Director of Public Prosecutions, a guy named Stephen Parkinson, and he wants Britons to know that if they so much as retweet anything that insults the foreign nationals who are living illegally in their country, then the full force of the law will descend on them. Watch.
The offence of incitement to racial hatred involves publishing or distributing material which is insulting or abusive, which is intended to or likely to start racial hatred. So if you retweet that, then you're republishing that, and then potentially you're committing that offence. And we do have dedicated police officers who are scouring social media. Their job is to look for this material and then follow up with identification arrests and so forth. So it's a really, really serious. People might think they're not doing anything harmful. They are, and the consequences will be visited upon them.
Consequences will be visited upon them. So, you've got children being stabbed to death, but what they're worried about, they have a dedicated police officer scouring social media to find mean comments about immigrants. Now, aside from the accent and the language, it's a clip that might as well be from North Korea. Instead of having teams of police officers deporting some of the illegal aliens who are living in Britain, which would actually accomplish something productive, the British government is spending its time scouring Twitter looking for retweets they don't like. And apparently, even if you write like RTs are not endorsements in your bio, you're not going to be spared. If you retweet something that Keir Starmer thinks is naughty, you'll go to prison. The consequences will be visited upon you. Now, of course, Stephen Parkinson left the standard vague on purpose so that no one knows where the line is exactly. Take this quote from the New York Times, for example. More British Muslim men have joined ISIS and the Nusra Front than are serving in the British Armed Forces. We mentioned that yesterday on the show. But would a statement like that qualify as inciting racial hatred? It happens to be a factually true statement, as unbelievable and incredible as it may seem, that there are more British Muslims that are interested in joining terrorist groups than fighting for the British Armed Forces. But are you allowed to at least point that out? What if you point it out and don't even comment on it? What if you offer no commentary? You just say, here's a thing that's happening. Well, that might be against the law now because it may lead people to conclude that Britain's immigration policy isn't the best. So maybe you can't retweet that or say it. Nobody knows. It's a completely subjective standard that's clearly designed to terrify people into submission. They don't want to make people afraid to. They want to make people. They don't just want to make people afraid to speak their mind. They also want to make people afraid to agree with someone else who speaks their mind. So it's about terrifying you into silence, and also part of terrifying you into silence is letting you know that you'll be isolated. That if you go out on a limb and you say something that the authorities don't like, not only are they going to come after you, but other people are not allowed to even agree with you or amplify what you said, so you're going to be alone on an island. That's the idea. They're going several layers deep in order to censor dissent, as all illegitimate regimes do. Pretty soon they'll be rounding up the family members of anyone who likes a tweet criticizing Keir Starmer. Now, if this were happening in any other third world country, the State Department would immediately condemn this as a flagrant abuse of human rights. The UN Security Council would hold a meeting. We might even invade so that we can spread freedom and democracy. We'd find like rebel groups that want to take over the government. We'd give them money and guns to do it. But because Britain is a supposedly already a first world country, and also because they sit on the Security Council, no one says anything. Britain, like Canada, has descended very sharply and very quickly into totalitarianism. The government can tolerate the murder of children. It can't tolerate criticism or even retweets of criticism. The rapid collapse of both Britain and Canada raises the obvious question of whether and when a similar collapse might happen here. And there's one clear indication that it might come sooner than we think. Yesterday, I spoke at length about Tim Walz, who's repeatedly lied about his military service record. His lies have been exposed, for the most part, because of free and open discussion on social media. And there's no doubt that if he gets into the White House, Tim Walz will do everything he can to shut down those discussions. He said as much in 2022 during an interview with MSNBC. Listen.
I think we need to push back on this. There's no guarantee to free speech on misinformation or hate speech, and especially around our democracy.
There's no guarantee to free speech on misinformation or hate speech, and especially around our democracy. Well, that line by itself should have disqualified Tim Walz from getting anywhere near the vice presidential shortlist. It should have disqualified him from continuing to serve in the government of Minnesota in any capacity. In a serious country, he would be impeached and removed from office for saying that. But Tim Walz was not impeached. He didn't suffer any consequences whatsoever. He was barely even criticized. On some corners of the internet, people reacted to that footage by, saying that Tim Walz must have failed high school civics, that sort of thing. But that's actually not what the clip shows. We can assume that Tim Walz knows that the First Amendment protects misinformation and hate speech and even criticisms of democracy, whatever those things mean. Which, by the way, if you're saying First Amendment does not protect your right to engage in hate speech against democracy, what does that mean? He means the government. So he just pretty explicitly said that you do not have the First Amendment right to criticize the government. Now, in fact, if the First Amendment does not protect so-called hate speech and so-called misinformation, then it doesn't protect anything. After all, something is labeled misinformation if some people, especially powerful people, claim that it's untrue or inaccurate. And something is labeled hate speech if some people, especially powerful people, claim that it's morally repugnant and offensive. So if the First Amendment does not cover misinformation and hate speech, that means that we're free to say anything we want as long as it's not something that powerful people consider wrong, inaccurate, offensive, or outrageous. Which is to say, we don't have free speech or anything approaching free speech. If we only have free speech up to the point when powerful people don't like it, then there's no free speech. Or at the very least, that is a level of free speech that you can find in North Korea or Iran or any of those places. Now, Tim Walz knows this. He's not the smartest guy, but he's smart enough to understand the basic principle here. So the real takeaway then is that he just doesn't care. He understands that the First Amendment is just words on paper. The Soviet Union had a constitution guaranteeing free speech. Canada and the UK have charters that supposedly protect freedom of expression. But the Constitution and charters, they don't matter if nobody cares about what they say. These are not self-enforcing things. They have to actually be enforced actively. And if they're not, they may as well not exist. This is the trajectory that we're on. A decade ago, nobody in the UK would have thought that the police would ever show up at their door because they retweeted someone else's political commentary. And now that's the reality of living in Britain. The insidious thing about this kind of censorship is that by the time it takes hold, it's too late to actually do anything about it. Protesters inevitably turn to violence, which in turn leads to more censorship and more crackdowns. This is the cycle that leads to a country so unstable and so dangerous that it can't even host a Taylor Swift concert anymore. So reasonable people look to Europe then as a cautionary tale. But people like Tim Walz and Kamala Harris see it as a blueprint. Now let's get to our 5 headlines. It's far too easy to put something important off because I just don't have the time or patience to deal with it. It's like going to the DMV. But sitting here talking on today's cultural and political issues has taken at least a decade off my life, which is why it's so important to stop putting off finding the perfect life insurance company. Policy Genius makes choosing the right policy for your family easy and quick. As the country's leading online insurance marketplace, Policy Genius gives you peace of mind knowing that if something were to happen to you, your family could cover their expenses while getting back on their feet. With Policy Genius, you can find life insurance policies that start at just $292 per year for $1 million of coverage. Some options are 100% online and let you avoid unnecessary medical exams. Policy Genius has licensed, award-winning agents and technology that makes it easy to compare life insurance quotes from America's top insurers in just a few clicks to find the lowest price. Their team of licensed experts is on hand to help you through the process. Even if you already have a life insurance policy through work, it may not offer enough protection for your family's needs, and it may not follow you if you leave your job. Policy Genius works for you, not the insurance companies. That means they don't have the incentive to recommend one insurer over another. Don't put off life insurance. Make it easy with Policy Genius. Head to policygenius.com/Walsh or click the link in the description to get your free life insurance quotes and see how much you could save. That's policygenius.com/Walsh. So The Guardian has a report today, this week rather. Headline, Young women are the most progressive group in American history. Young men are checked out. So this is a dynamic that we're all very familiar with at this point, I think. And this is just the latest sort of report and commentary on it. I'll read a little bit of it. And I have a few points of my own to make about this. When Donald Trump strutted onto stage at the Republican National Convention last month, it was to a raucous cover of James Brown's It's a Man's World. The song credits men with inventing cars, trains, lights, boats, toys, and commerce, which, we did. The message was not subtle, at least not to Melissa Deckman. Quote, this idea of America needing someone who is a strong, masculine figure, I think the Republican campaign this year is doing it even in a more pronounced and overt way than it did in 2016, said Deckman, CEO of the Public Religion Research Institute. You have a lot of younger men admiring the strength of Trump, or what they think is strong. Deckman would know in her forthcoming book, The Politics of Gen Z, How the Youngest Voters Will Shape Our Democracy. She dives into the deep political divides between Gen Z women and men and explores how they feel about growing up in the Trump era. Based on interviews with roughly 90 Gen Z political activists, numerous focus groups, and extensive polling, Deckman has identified what she calls a historic reverse gender gap. She's found that Gen Z men are becoming more conservative as well as increasingly indifferent to politics, bucking long-standing trends dating back to at least the 1970s that saw young people across the board voting liberal and men being generally more involved in politics than women. Meanwhile, Gen Z women have not only become the most progressive cohort in the U.S., in U.S. history rather, but are also expected to outpace their male peers across virtually every measure of political involvement, such as donating money, volunteering for campaigns, registering people to vote, and, of course, voting. Young women were outstripping men on political engagement well before Joe Biden stepped aside in favor of Kamala Harris. Now with Harris, the presumptive Democratic nominee, a generation already riven by a canyon-wide political gender gap is watching a contest between a woman and blah, blah, blah. So in 2022, 49% of Gen Z men said that the United States had become too soft and feminine, Deckman found. Just a year later, 60% of Gen Z men said the same. So we find that this divide is not only present, but it's growing deeper and deeper. So this is, again, a well-established fact at this point. A lot has been said and written about the political gender divide. Women, unmarried women specifically, and we talk about Gen Z women, of course, there are unmarried women who are older, but so it's not just Gen Z. It's really, as we're talking about, unmarried women are much more likely to be liberal. In fact, Republicans win when you break down the gender demographics any other way. Republicans win. Republicans win married women. They win married men. They win unmarried men. The only group they don't win are the unmarried women. And they lose that group by like a wide margin. So it's a fascinating and quite troubling trend, which is why it's been discussed so much, for good reason. And there are two questions that immediately arise, of course, which is, why is this the case? Number one. And number two, what do we do about it? Which is more a question of, if you're a conservative or if you're a Republican, what do you do about it? How do you respond to it? The why is a long answer. It's very multifaceted. Everyone has theories about why it's breaking down this way. Some of the theories are good. Many times I think that they're fanciful. Why are women, unmarried women especially, trending so liberal? Well, part of it is that, I mean, there's a lot. I mean, part of it is that women are naturally more emotional and empathetic. Democrat rhetoric and tactics play on that and exploit that. We know that Democrats rarely argue for a policy by laying out its practical benefits or explaining how it will make your life better and your community better in some measurable way. They rarely do that, unless they're just offering bribes, right? Unless they're just saying, we're going to pay off your student loans, here's some welfare. So in that case, they will try to appeal, you might say, in a more practical way. But aside from bribery, they don't spend a lot of time explaining, like, here's a policy, and no, we're not going to give you money, but when we enact this policy, it's going to actually make your life better. And here's how, in ways that you can see and feel and experience. They don't spend a lot of time doing that. They make the emotional argument, which is cloaked usually as a moral argument. And it's very effective with women. It's less effective with men. Now, also, there's the simple fact that Democrats suck up to women and really deify women and celebrate women constantly while demonizing and scapegoating men. That's another part of the story here. Like, you're just never going to hear a Democrat politician say the word men or man in an explicitly positive context. You'll never hear it. They'll say it in a neutral context, sometimes. They'll say it in a negative context, talking about the problems with men and what men are doing wrong. You will literally never hear any of them ever say anything positive about men as a group. You will never, ever hear it. That's the kind of thing that we're so used to it that you hear that and it just kind of bounces off of you. But really think about that. And you could go looking for an example to disprove my point, but you can't find it. Like, go try to find, I'll give you like the last 20 years. Go try to find a Democrat politician singling out men specifically in a positive way. Never happens. Never happens. So, and that's not the case for women. I mean, women are flattered all the time. And most cases, if you hear a Democrat politician say the word woman or women, it will be followed by something complimentary. So women are flattered, men are demoralized. When this article says that men are checked out, that's the point. Like, that's the reason behind the demoralization campaign. It's actually not that surprising that you have young men that are checked out. I don't know if they're checked out to the degree that this article in The Guardian claims, but that's the idea. When you're constantly scapegoating and demonizing a certain group and telling this group that you don't care about them, you don't need them, you don't want them, it has a demoralizing effect. So there's that as well. And then I think it's also undoubtedly the case that women are more collectivist in a sense. Communal would be maybe the less pejorative way of saying it. And, I don't mean it as a pejorative. Women are more group-oriented. They are. And this has many positive results. It means that women make friends, they stay socially connected. When they get married, they're the ones who make sure that the family keeps in touch with friends and family and is involved in the community and goes out and does like things goes out and does, there's a community event somewhere, there's a fair or something happening in the community, and there are families there. It's like 95% of the families are there because the mom insisted that they come. And so that's the positive end of women being wired that way. There's also the downside. Women and girls can tend to fall more easily into trends and fads, more susceptible to peer pressure, more harmed mentally by social alienation and ostracization. There's a reason that adolescent girls are so much more likely to be gender dysphoric, so much more likely to develop eating disorders. There's always like some some kind of trend like that making its way through middle schools and high schools, some kind of self-destructive trend that adolescent girls are getting wrapped up into, and right now it's gender dysphoria. And this relates back to the political question, because we live in a progressive society where all of our institutions push progressivism, so women are just more likely to be influenced by that and to care about that. You know, Taylor Swift is liberal, and to a lot of her female fans, that matters. They want to have the same values as Taylor Swift and the other Taylor Swift fans. Like, it's just a fact. Men are not impervious to this, are not impervious to groupthink, obviously, but as men, we tend to have more of a contrarian, more of an antisocial streak to us that can, in some contexts, serve us well. It can also cause problems, but in this case, it makes us less susceptible to the kind of groupthink that leads to people becoming green-haired wokesters, right? In fact, it's interesting that the article mentions how back in the 60s and 70s, young men were more liberal and more politically involved. And this is seen as kind of a mysterious fact. What happened? Well, I wonder if what I'm talking about here isn't part of the explanation for that. Back 50 years ago, it was countercultural, it was rebellious, it was contrarian to be liberal. And so, more young men were attracted to it, partly for that reason. And now it has flipped, and so have young men. Now, of course, the problem with my theory is that it probably doesn't hold up if you go back further. I don't think you're going to find historically that young men have always just been like reflexively opposed to the dominant cultural value system. In fact, I'm sure that isn't the case. So it's not quite as simple as that, I admit. So then you have to go deeper into the male psyche. Like, if men are more likely to be rebellious and contrarian and countercultural today, why is that? Why are men attracted to that? I think it might be the danger, kind of the fight is why we find that's appealing, especially younger men. Well, older societies have had other ways of harnessing that energy. Older societies, especially, the farther you go back, I think the more that's the case. That young men have always had this hunger for danger, for the fight, for adventure. And when you go back into earlier times, there were other ways to kind of naturally harness that in society. Not so much now. And so young men look for other outlets. So I think that's part of what's going on here. And there's more to it than that even. You could spend hours breaking it down. But the most immediate question is like, okay, this is the case. For whatever reason, this is the situation we're facing right now. That unmarried women are very, very liberal, more liberal than they've ever been by a huge margin. And they are, and in that way, they're like a sore thumb sticking out from all the other groups, married, unmarried men, married women. That's the fact. From a political perspective, what do you do about that right now? And this is why I go back to, I'll keep saying it till I'm blue in the face here, but yeah, long term, as a conservative, you got to find some way to turn this trend around. But right now, especially in this election season, there's nothing we can do about that. Unmarried women, single women are just very liberal, and that's it. We're not gonna change that in the next 3 months. It's not gonna happen. Which means, now I'm not saying that you give up on single women politically, but in a way you kind of have to. Like, you're not gonna win them. It's just it. That's done right now. It's not gonna happen. So you really don't tailor any of your messaging to this group that you cannot win right now. You want to come up with a 30-year plan so that 30 years from now, maybe you can win them? Then yeah, we could talk about that. But right now, that's a 30-year plan. That's not a 3-month plan. Right now, you have to look at the groups that are just, you can't win. And say, okay, well, like, we're happy to have your vote. Please, you're welcome to come vote for us. But we're not going to do a whole lot to try to appeal to you specifically because you've made it clear you don't want anything to do with us right now. Okay, have it your way. And then you have to look and mobilize the voters who you know you can attract and you can appeal to. And that's what Kamala's campaign is doing. It's part of the way that they're getting these big rallies and they're creating this illusion that she's some sort of political sensation. But they know what their crowd is, they know who they have to mobilize, and that's what they're doing. That's why they had Megan Thee Stallion at a rally. You know, that's not going to appeal. Like, if you want to appeal to, let's say, married white men, you're not going to do it with Megan Thee Stallion. But what Kamala's campaign is saying is like, okay, we know we don't have you people. We don't need you. Married white men, who cares? Like, this is the group we need, and we're going to get them, and we're going to drown you out by getting all these people. And it's say whatever you want about it, but it's a smart political strategy, and it could work. And Republicans need to be doing the same in the reverse. They need to be saying, okay, like we're not going to, unmarried single women, Gen Z women, not going to get them. What can we do? How can we? Okay, there's a lot of disaffected single and married men. What can we do to appeal to them specifically and directly and explicitly and try to mobilize them to get into this thing and get excited about it? And I think that there's some of that happening, but not nearly enough. Okay, Cori Bush, as mentioned a few days ago, lost her primary. She'll be gone from Congress. And it's a humiliation that could not have happened to a more deserving person, I think we can say. But Cori Bush was not happy about losing, understandably not happy about it. And that led to an interesting concession speech. Let's listen to it.
Pulling me away from my position as Congresswoman. All you did was take some of the strings off. Let's be clear. 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 Let's talk about what it really is. Because see, now I don't have to worry about some strings that I have attached, and as much as I love my job. But all they did was radicalize me, and so now they need to be afraid. See, now they about to see this other Cori, this other side, because let me say this. I just grew up a whole lot more over the last few weeks. Just grew up a whole different way. And so what they are about to get, they think. So the thing is this. The thing is this. I don't think that anything, there is nothing that happens in my life that happens in vain. So if this happened, it's because it was meant to happen. And let me say, it's because of the work that I need to do. And let me say this.
Shut up, Cori. So, first of all, no one's afraid of you. So I'm radicalized now. But you have no power anymore. You're not in Congress anymore. You have no influence. Nobody cares what Cori Bush thinks. So you're just done. Like, you're done. A few other things to notice here, and this is just a small thing to note, but you heard her get stuck in this kind of vocal loop where she repeats "let's be clear" like 10 times. And I've noticed that that's one of the hallmarks of a low IQ person. I'm just an interesting side note. Not quite sure how to explain it, but the next time you're around a very dumb person who's angry about something, notice how they tend to get upset and they ramble and shout, and then they get stuck on like a certain word or phrase they'll repeat over and over again. A more intelligent person, someone with an internal monologue and like the capacity for introspection, will have more of a progression of thoughts. One statement leads to the next. But dumb people like Cori Bush, this is what they sound like. It's also interesting that she kept saying that the strings are off, which is an interesting thing to say. So are you admitting that, what do you mean the strings are off? Are you admitting you were a puppet before? Is that the image? What do you mean, like, so that brings to mind the image of like a marionette. So you're saying you were a puppet before and now you're no longer a puppet. Now you're a real boy, like Pinocchio. Why did you have strings when you were in Congress? Like, that tells us something about, I don't have any doubt that she had strings in Congress, but what does that say about her? But really, the thing you notice about this is, and people are focused on the fact that she went on to attack AIPAC and all of that, but the real issue is how self-centered and self-focused she sounds. This is all about her, right? And usually in a concession speech, if you could even call that a concession speech, but usually in a concession speech, and yeah, it's phony, but the losing candidate will say things like, well, yeah, this isn't about me, it's about all of you. We're still in this fight together. I couldn't have done this without any of you, and all this. Like, the candidate will bring it back to the people and pretend that that's what she's really concerned about. But for Cori Bush, it's just all about her. See, I mean, that's a 90-second clip. How many times did the words I and me come up in that clip? Probably like 20 times. And this is the problem that we have. There are many Cori Bushes in Congress that are not just exceedingly stupid, although she is, but intensely focused on themselves. And so dumb that they can't even pretend otherwise at this point. That's the kind of people we have representing us. Remember the incredible film, What is a Woman? Well, I got the same group of white guys back together to ask America's next burning question. Am I racist? It's coming to theaters this September. I went deep undercover into a cesspool of DEI insanity. I rubbed elbows with professional race hustlers and diversity con artists. Some would say I did the work, and now it's your turn. But the date, I need you to remember right now, is Thursday, August 15th. That's when pre-sale tickets go on sale. With your help, we're going to stick it to the woke mob, one ticket at a time. Get all the details and watch the official trailer at amiracist.com. Now let's get to our daily cancellation. You know, sometimes on this show, I like to read questions and quandaries from the clueless souls on the internet, especially Reddit, and try my best to provide them with a little bit of guidance. And that was the plan that I had for this segment, but then my producer, McKenna, suggested that for these purposes, I go to the subreddit called Regretful Parents to find some fodder for the segment. And I did as she recommended, and I can report that it is one of the most depressing places I've ever encountered on the internet, which is obviously saying a lot. This is a forum, as the name suggests, of parents who regret becoming parents. Just post after post after post of parents who view their children as nothing but a burden. Talk about their kids like a person might talk about head lice or tapeworms. Their children are parasites in their eyes. This doesn't appear to be the attitude of every person who posts on the forum, some of whom are dealing with truly tragic personal situations, but it is the attitude of some of them, probably most of them. So at first I read all this and I thought, well, and I spent way too much, I went down a kind of a doom spiral of reading all these posts on this forum. And I thought, well, I'm not going to attempt to talk about this on the show. It's so bleak and so horrific. But then I decided that maybe I might have a useful thing or two to say to these people. After all, there's a reason why this is such a popular and active forum. Sadly, a sizable number of parents feel this way. We like to think that, well, no one ever regrets having kids. Actually, they do sometimes. And when that happens, it is a terrible thing. Terrible for the kids, most importantly. And it's enough of a problem, and I would guess, anecdotally, just a growing problem in this country that it's certainly worth addressing. So this isn't really going to be a daily cancellation. The subject itself doesn't quite lend itself to that. So the cancellation is canceled just for today so that we could talk about this. So I'm going to start by reading a few of the posts or snippets of posts on this forum. And then I want to offer a few thoughts. So here we go. One post says, I hate mothering. I enjoy maybe 1% of it. It's given me misery on top of pain every single day since she was born. Giving birth was medieval torture. I don't like playing with her. I don't like talking to her. I don't like taking her to the park. I can barely think about anything I enjoy with her. Maybe cooking for her, I don't even know. Another says, my kids are 1 and 3 and they took away everything I enjoyed. I'm going through the wildest mental and physical challenges of my life. I had goals and dreams that are not realistic anymore. All my favorite activities are replaced by draining micro tasks, and it's grinding me to my knees every day. Someone else says, if I only knew that this subreddit existed, I probably could have avoided the biggest regret of my life, which is becoming a mother. I feel so tied up. I want to get education. I want to work and travel. I want to live again and fall in love with life again. I used to travel a lot back in my early 20s. I always took part in some exchange programs in Europe and got to see a lot. I met amazing people. My son's about to be 3 and I'm just not having it. I've been contemplating just leaving them and starting my life somewhere else. Other one says, I keep my patience and my rage in check all day by repeating bedtime is only hours away. Bedtime is only hours away in my head. When it's past bedtime and they're still up my ass, I tend to lose my shit. It's like, I put up with them all day. Now can I please have some relief? If I had known autism apparently runs in my family, I honestly wouldn't have had kids at all. It's an energy and happiness suck. Nothing but misery and regret as far as the eye can see. Then things get even darker, if you can believe it. Another post says, I hate my children, both of them. They're 2 and 1, and I hate every single second they're awake. I can't sleep peacefully. I can't eat. I can't even take a shit peacefully. I'm tired of this life. I'm the only one with them 24/7. I'm so sick of it. My partner is useless. All he says is they're babies and something's wrong with me. How could I dislike my own children? I haven't had one happy day in 2 damn years. Specifically, my oldest. My daughter, every single thing she does pisses me off. I'm constantly stressed, constantly screaming for her to stop touching things. I'm so tired of this. Oh my God, I wish I could turn back time and not have any of them. I wish I had never met their father. In a similar vein, someone says, my daughter just turned 5 and I was already regretful about having her and having no love for her. We treat her well and I say I love her and all that jazz to not mess up her childhood, but she has now been diagnosed with selective mutism, which is a type of anxiety disorder where she can't speak in public or to anyone outside her immediate family. Her teacher says she doesn't speak a word at school and her peers keep asking her why she doesn't talk. I already hated life as a parent, and now I have to deal with psychologist appointments. What a joke of a life I've gotten myself into. Then someone with an older kid says that my son is 11 and I still regret it every day. He's boring, annoying, rude. I can't stand to be around him. I just want to live my life alone with friends. I'm counting down the days when he finally leaves my home. If I could afford boarding school, I would. It's school holidays, so this week I'm taking him to a water park, then football practice, then an air show. None of those things I personally enjoy. Only 7 years to go, and he's out of my house for good. These have mostly been mothers so far with these posts, but there are also some dads are on the forum. I'll read one of those just to be egalitarian about it. Just day after day after day, and it never ends and it never changes. Incessant bickering, screaming, slapping, kicking, biting, fighting over every possible tiny little thing. When all my attempts for diplomacy fail and I finally snap and yell at them to stop, they act absolutely shocked and hurt by how mean dad is, and it works. I end up feeling terrible and apologizing to them, and on and on and on it goes. My brain and nerves are completely shot. I don't understand how they seem to thrive in that level of dysfunction. I know kids are dramatic and all, but I know I was never like that as a kid. It's bonkers. Okay, so a lot of frustration there, to put it mildly. And I understand parenting frustration. I don't understand hating your kid, or most of what we just read there, but frustration, sure. When you have, as we did, 2 sets of twins, 6 kids total, you experience frustration. Our last set of twins were both colicky as infants. And if you know anything about colic in an infant, you know that, well, we dealt with about 6 months of constant crying, morning, noon, and night, from 2 babies, while also having 4 other kids to take care of. And this was not that long ago. This was a year and a half ago. So I'm not saying that that's the hardest parenting experience anyone's ever had, but it's definitely not entry-level stuff that we were dealing with. So I've been in the trenches, is what I'm saying. And therefore, I think I have some credibility to say the things that I'm going to say to all of these people and anyone who might find themselves relating to what I just read. And some of what I'm going to say will sound harsh. It will certainly not sound like anything that your therapist will probably tell you. And it's also not likely what your friends and family will say to you or have said to you. But I'm going to say it because I think it needs to be said, and it needs to be said for your sake, and more importantly, for the sake of your children. So 3 points, 3 pieces of advice. First, a lot of parents who feel this level of anger and despair to the point of actually regretting having kids, it's at least partly because their kids are out of control and totally unruly. That's not what's happening in all of these cases, but in some of them. In particular, that last one that I read. The kids are running the house, bouncing off the walls, ruling the roost, and you're at wit's end. Well, here's the good news about that. And it will sound like bad news, but it's actually good news, is that it's your fault. It's totally your fault. You are 100% to blame. Your kids are out of control because you are out of control. And I don't mean that you're yelling and screaming and losing your temper, though you might be. But even when you have your temper in check, you're still being ruled by your emotions. You are, I'm going to assume, angry, sullen, visibly overwhelmed, overcome by frustration, and so on and so on. And then maybe giving yourself credit because although you feel that way and you're coming off that way, at least you're not yelling. Well, the problem is that your kids pick up on that. They see it. And it's not just that they're imitating your lack of emotional regulation, though they are. More importantly, they see that you are projecting a lack of control, a loss of command. And they lose respect for you and your rules as a result. And that's natural. When a leader seems flustered, his followers become disturbed. And if this state of being flustered continues or happens over and over again, eventually they lose faith in his ability to lead. People who listen to my show know that I'm kind of a nerd about reading stories of explorers. And sometimes in these stories, something that happens are mutinies. And very often a mutiny happens because you've got a ship full of men in some uncharted part of the world. And if the men on the ship whose lives depend on the captain, if they perceive that the captain doesn't know what he's doing, is afraid, is frustrated, indecisive, overwhelmed by the responsibility that he has taken on. If the men on the ship notice that, if they perceive it, they lose faith in his leadership. And then there's a mutiny. So what's happening in some of these households is your kids it's a mutiny. They're staging a mutiny, although their reasons behind it are mostly unconscious, for the kids anyway. Now, what makes this good news is that it's very fixable. All you have to do is put on a convincing front. Fake it till you make it, as some very wise philosopher once said. Project the appearance of being in control, of being in command, of being unbothered, of being unflustered, happy, good-humored. You don't have to feel that way. Just pretend that you feel that way. And yes, it is a virtue to fake it in those cases. This idea that we should never, we need to be true to ourselves and be honest about our emotions. No, you shouldn't be. In fact, you should not be honest about your emotions most of the time. Like most of what you're feeling should not be known to the people around you. And especially when you're a parent. Just pretend. And you combine that attitude or the appearance of that attitude with consistent guidelines, clear rules, and clear consequences for breaking the rules, and you'll no longer have this level of dysfunction in your home. Your children will not be in a constant state of war with each other and you. And you may be able to enjoy their company and your own life as a consequence. Second, happiness is a matter of focus. Happy people focus on the aspects of things that make them happy. Unhappy people focus on the aspects that make them unhappy. That seems so basic that it doesn't even need to be said, but it's a basic thing that we often lose sight of. And this especially applies to parenting. If you're an unhappy parent, it's because you're choosing to focus on all of the things that you want to do but can't because you have kids, and the things that you have to do but don't want to do. For the people who wrote these laments that I just read, this focus for them has become obsessive. All they can think about is the stuff they don't want to have to do, but they have to do. And the stuff that they would prefer to do, but they can't do. And so they're just whining all the time in their heads and now on Reddit. I don't want to do this. I don't want to do it anymore. This is hard. I don't want to have to do these things. I want to travel. Look, it's a choice that you have made to focus your attention on those things. There are so many things in life you could focus on, and you decided to focus on the fact that you can't travel to Europe or whatever. So your unhappiness is a choice. You've decided to be miserable and wallow in your misery. And you could stay there forever, wallowing in it if you want. Plenty of people do. And then you'll be unhappy and miserable your whole life. In the process, you'll alienate everybody around you. Your kids will grow to resent you and want nothing to do with you. And then they'll get older and they'll be adults and they won't be as difficult anymore. And you're going to want to have a relationship with them at that point because it's easy now because they're out of the house. And they're going to have grandkids and you're going to want to see the grandkids because grandkids are easy. But your kids are not going to want to have that relationship. And you're going to spend the rest of your life feeling victimized. Oh, my kids ignore me. They don't come over. They don't bring the grandkids over. Why should they? You were awful to them. You did the bare minimum their whole childhood. You put no effort in. Like you fed them and clothed them. You have to do that. But you had a bad attitude about it the entire time. You made the home an excruciating environment for them to live in. You spent the whole time whining. Why the hell would they want a relationship with you? A relationship with who? There's no relationship here. Sorry. Your chance to build that is over. Guess what? So that's how it can go if you choose that. The only person who can choose otherwise is you. The only person who can fix the problem is you. Nobody else can. Your kids certainly can't. Now, I've never felt like I regretted being a parent, nor have I ever had feelings of hatred towards my children, for God's sake. But I have experienced anger, frustration, sadness as a parent. I have thrown plenty of pity parties for myself, like any parent does, because my parenting duties require me to do stuff I don't want to do and don't allow me to do the stuff that I do want to do. So I get that. Like, I've been there. And I found that the way out of it is pretty simple. It's just about redirecting my attention. I can choose to redirect it or not. It really is up to me. So here's a relatable example, one that is, millions of parents encounter something like this every day. So I get home from work most days around 5:30 or 6. And contrary to popular opinion, I actually work long days and I work hard, believe it or not. Media is a stressful gig, if you can believe it. And then I sit in traffic for 45 minutes. It's not that bad. A lot of people sit in traffic for longer, but still 45 minutes in traffic. And then I come home to a house full of kids who are talkative and needy and wanting my attention. So every time I walk in the door every day, I have a choice to make. And it's a very distinct choice. It's so distinct that it may as well be two different doors I'm walking in. There's the happy door or the annoyed, overwhelmed, sad door. I'm either a stressed out, sad sack forced to come home to a noisy house with a bunch of needy kids who won't give me a chance to decompress, damn it. Or I'm an incredibly blessed man, privileged to come home each night to a lively home full of fun, rambunctious children and a wife who loves me. I could be either one of those. It's completely up to me. And the thing is, when I walk in the door, the environment, what I'm walking into, is the same. It is entirely up to me how I choose to perceive it, how I choose to see it. And if I choose the sad, miserable door, I have no one to blame but myself. My third point is stop and this goes to really, this is advice, universal advice for everybody. Stop venting. Okay? You've done enough venting. And I know everybody says that we have to vent. We have to release our tension in the form of these self-pitying, overly dramatic sessions. And if we don't, we'll explode or something. But that's bull. Stop venting. It's unhealthy. Forums like this Reddit forum, they should not exist. These are awful places. Nothing good comes from them. Having a place to anonymously voice your darkest and most unspeakable emotions and thoughts in order to then be assured by other anonymous people that it's totally normal to feel that way and to be encouraged in your basest impulses and most dysfunctional modes of thought is bad. It's very bad. It's not good for you. Especially because all the people that are, and I read the comments under a lot of those posts that I just read, people giving their own advice. The advice is terrible. I mean, it's just awful. There was one post that I don't think I read of a woman whose her young son is about to be his birthday, and she's not happy about his birthday and not excited about it. Which again, it's like, okay, so you're not excited about his birthday. Deal with it. Like, it's his birthday, it's not yours. Pretend you're excited. Damn it, stop being selfish. But one of the pieces of advice that someone left, had a bunch of likes, upvotes, or whatever, was, well, on the day of his birthday party, just leave the house and have some time to yourself. Don't tell anyone, just leave. And come back at night. Like, this is your advice? It's the worst possible thing. You abandon your child on their birthday because you're sad? This is what you get from these forums. And the reason that you get it is because the people that are there leaving comments, they are not encouraging you or trying to reassure you. They're trying to reassure themselves. They're only there to make themselves feel better. They have these awful thoughts and feelings about their own family and their children, and they're trying to find a place where other people are saying the same things so that they can tell themselves it's not so terrible to feel this way. And so everybody, they're all just encouraging themselves in the form of encouraging other people to be the worst versions of themselves they can possibly be. Now, the truth is, I know we like to say that, there's no such thing as a wrong feeling, and you should be honest about how you feel. Well, there is such thing as a wrong feeling. You shouldn't hate your children. It is wrong to have that emotion. It's possible to have wrong emotions. Yeah, and that's one of them. Like, it's bad to have that. You shouldn't feel that way. There's something wrong with you morally. It is morally wrong to have that feeling, actually. The level of anger expressed by most of these people is wrong. Having this kind of disdain for your family is wrong. Venting this kind of stuff doesn't get it off your chest. It doesn't work like that. It's not like opening a window in the bathroom to air out the smell. It's more like a gust of wind on a campfire. All it does is make the flame grow and spread until it's completely out of control. And next thing, your whole life is set on fire. And that's what these Reddit forums do. So what should you do if you have feelings like the lady who says that she doesn't like her 11-year-old son, can't wait for him to leave the house? Well, and by the way, speak for yourself. You call your 11-year-old son boring? Like, you're the boring one. Well, there's nothing more boring than a middle-aged woman who's like, oh, my life's hard. Like, that's, oh my God, that's boring. You're boring. That's boring as hell. And so what should you do? You shouldn't look for an anonymous group of fellow self-pitying whiners to unload that on. You should realize that this feeling is wrong. It's not normal. It's not okay to feel that way about your children. The problem is you. It's not your child. It's you. Your children didn't do anything wrong. You are doing the wrong thing, and you need to fix it. So sure, go talk to a therapist if you can find a good one. Big if there, but if you can find a good one. Talk to a spiritual advisor, even better. Talk to a priest, talk to a pastor. But after all the talking, it comes back to you. You owe it to your child to give him your love. In fact, you owe it to your family to be happy. Happiness is a responsibility. And it is a choice. And right now, you're making a choice that is destroying you and your family. And it will continue to until you stop making it. Well, that'll do it for the show today. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Talk to you on Monday. Have a great weekend. Godspeed.
Republicans are Nazis. You cannot separate yourselves from the bad white people.
Growing up, I never thought much about race. It never really seemed to matter that much, at least not to me.
Am I racist?
I would really appreciate it if you left.
I'm trying to learn. I'm on this journey.
If I'm going to sort this out, I need to go deeper undercover.
They gon' say I'm racist.
Joining us now is Matt, certified DEI expert.
Here's my certification. And what you're doing is you're stretching out of your whiteness. This is more for you and less for you. Is America inherently racist?
The word inherent is challenging there.
I want to rename the George Washington Monument to the George Floyd Monument.
America is racist to its bones.
So inherently.
Yeah, this country is a piece of shit.
White.
Folks.
White.
Trash. White supremacy. White woman. White boy.
Is there a black person around here? What's a black person right here? Does he not exist?
Hi, Robin.
Hi. What's your name?
I'm Matt.
I just had to ask who you are because you have to be careful.
Never be too careful.
They gon' say you racist.
In theaters September 13th, rated PG-13.